Everyone, it's Emily Fox. Today's video is going to be the continuation of my end of year book video series where we're talking about the best, the worst, the most surprising, and today, the most disappointing books that I've read throughout 2022. It was my best reading year ever. However, there are still books that were disappointing or awful, which you'll see soon. And I wanted to talk about them, review them, kind of an anti-recommendation video. Obviously, everyone is going to feel differently about every book that they read. Feel free to agree or disagree with me in the comment section, but I'm going to give you my thoughts, a little bit of a summary of the plot, and yeah, we're going to complain. All the other videos in the series will be linked in the description box. So let's start with one of the books that was easily one of the most disappointing books of 2022. I know a lot of people are going to be talking about this one in their version of this video because this was just such a letdown. It wasn't like awful, but it was just so forgettable. And after reading Recursion and Dark Matter by the same author, I was looking forward to this one. I pre-ordered it and read it right away, and it was so boring because I attempted to vlog it, and it was so boring. The vlog never made it. I was really trying to be interested, but no. What I like usually with the author is the fact that his books, you can't put them down. They're like thriller sci-fi. You need to stay up till 2 in the morning to figure out what's going to happen. There are often really interesting twists. The sciencey bits are interesting, and you're aware that the writing style is not going to be great. It reads like a movie, which I think is fine for this specific genre of book. And usually his characters are not his strength, but you know it when you go into it. You know, you're not reading him for deep characters. The thing is, it feels like he's tried so hard in this one to create more interesting, more complex characters, and it failed. It completely failed. I was so bored. The sciencey bits, not interesting. No twists were really interesting in here, and it contains some of my least favorite tropes ever, which I've been watching other people's reviews, and they mention it, so I don't think that's a spoiler. I was being careful, overly careful. But in this one, with the title, Upgrade, the main character ends up in a situation beginning where he is infected by an upgrade. So he becomes, you know, stronger, faster, smarter, and I hate that trope so much. It kind of reminds me a little bit of like superheroes, which I'm personally not a fan of. And I feel like when you're following a character who is like that, nothing is at stake. Like the stakes are so low, and even if they end up fighting someone that is like them, it's like, oh, they're even now faster, I don't care. I don't care. I lost complete interest in this book so quickly, and the flaws of the writing was just even more obvious because my interest was not sustained at all. So boring. I struggled to finish. The only reason I finished it was because I wanted to review it as soon as I had it. And I was trying to read it all for one vlog, which again, never made it because this was so boring. Don't waste your time, honestly. I've read a lot of his books, and this is probably the most forgettable ones. At least the awful ones are interesting to complain about. This was just, there's nothing to say. It's boring. Let's do one that is 100% just not my thing, which, you know, that happens too. Kings of the Wyld. This was on my shelf for so long. I was looking forward to it. I like doing that. I buy a book and I just have it on my shelf, looking forward to it. I think it's going to be 5 stars. That's what happened with this one. But when I got around to reading it, this was so boring. The first time I put it down after like 50, 60 pages, and it was part of what I call my pile of shame. Basically books I want to eventually finish. And I attempted it again and still didn't finish it. I gave up about 300 pages into this like 500 pages book because I didn't care about the characters. The sense of humor was not my thing. The premise is super interesting. Let's start with that. You follow these 4 men who are 5 men who were mercenaries. They used to be very famous and they retired. They're getting old. But one of them, their daughter, is in danger, so they have to regroup and try and go and save her. Cool. I'm really into that. But at 300 pages, they're still just regrouping. The story hasn't really started, and I was bored. And then you add the jokes, which work for the characters. They don't work for me. I just did not feel like the target audience. Like, there are only so many eggplant jokes I can take before I just put down a book. Do I have one that I can actually say? Nope. I'm trying to find one I can say out loud. Maybe I'll just put it on the screen. Maybe that will be a little less offensive to advertisers, but, you know, the jokes were just not for me. They weren't for me. So yes, this isn't like the worst book I've ever read, but I thought it was pretty boring, did not sustain my interest, and then I just eventually put it down because of the sense of humor. So sadly, Very disappointed because I thought I was going to love this and I really, really didn't. Speaking of disappointment, this, I thought I was going to love it so much. Killers of a Certain Age. As soon as I got it in my book of the month box, I kept mentioning how much I was into the premise. You're following these 4 women who were spies for the last 40 years and they're retiring, and on their trip to celebrate the retirement, they realize that someone is after them trying to kill them. So they're trying to survive. That sounded really cool to me, but again, kind of boring, did not sustain my interest. The characters just lacked depth. Like, I feel like there was just so much potential, but did not live up to it. I did finish it because it's not a very long one, but I feel like it's very forgettable. I'm just so annoyed because, again, it felt like something quite different, but just, it wasn't good. The sense of humor, everything was just very surface level, and I feel like it would have benefited from more depth. So let's go through a couple of the ones I don't own a physical copy before I forget. A Fatal Grace by Louise. She is so well known. There are like 18 books now in this series, and I have been looking forward to reading this series for a while because it happens in Quebec, and I'm like, ooh, representation. And I love murder mysteries in small towns, and this is like a small village where there's like, I don't know, 100 people, and people keep being murdered. I was into this, okay? But I kept hearing really wonderful things, and to be fair, people were telling me to skip the first 2 books because they weren't as good. But I'm stubborn, and this is book 2. And I read book 1 the year prior to this. It was good, but this one was awful. Almost made it to my worst of the year because there's just so much fat phobia. And I'm aware that I don't always notice everything in books. I feel like we all have biases, things that we really get upset over, and the things that we don't necessarily notice right away. But this is bad, like non-stop fat phobia. The descriptions are so awful. I did borrow this from the library, so I don't have the exact quotes anymore, but it was really bad. A lot of it was targeted towards a child. And I know that like a lot of the characters that were narrating these sections are awful people, but even the really likable characters, one woman, she's a Black woman who went from the city to live to the small town. She used to be a psychologist, psychiatrist, and then she now owns a used bookstore. So like, she sounds really cool, but the way they kept describing her, the author kept describing her in this book compared to book 1, so much worse. And I don't understand how. I mean, I get that this was published a couple years ago, but like, Almond Moms have nothing on Louise Penny. This was just traumatizing. Don't read it. Let me know if I should still try book 3, because I had mentioned that no matter what happened with book 1 and 2, I would try book 3. So I might try it, but if it's anywhere near this level, I will never read anything else by her, because this was literally the most fatphobic book I've ever read. I wanted to talk about the 2 novella in the Skyward series. So the ones that go in between book 2 and 3. I don't even remember the title. I do not care to even look at it. They will be on the screen. I don't want to not be useful, but these were so bad. They were co-written, and you can tell he didn't write much because it does not read like his work. These were so boring and pointless. They were 200 pages, both of them. Like, just make a 5th book at that point. Like, I don't know, just pointless. Just wanted to give them a little shout out, but in a negative way. If I could go back in time, I would just read some spoilers because you learn a little bit of information, but so boring to the point that I have yet to pick book 3, which I had bought as soon as it was out because I wanted to read it. But these 2 put me in a slump for that specific series. I don't even want to continue. I will hopefully do it, but don't do it. Don't do it. They also felt a ton more YA than the other books in the series. I don't care about the romance. I don't know. Just no. Another one that had a ton of potential in my opinion, yet did not live up to it, is The Echo Wife, which you have this woman, she's a scientist, she's brilliant, she's married, and her husband basically uses her discoveries to clone her and like make her clone like a stay-at-home version of her. Anyway, basically he's cheating on her. Awful relationship. And I feel like this could have been such an interesting thriller, horror, sci-fi. The potential. But the author just doesn't go anywhere near far enough, in my opinion. The book was fairly short. It was under 300 pages. So they should have just went further, add 100 pages, make it a little unhinged, and I would have been all for it. But yeah, to me, it was kind of a meh book. Not awful, just forgettable. And again, the disappointment is due to the potential. This one is going to hurt. Be prepared. the First Law trilogy, but book 2 and 3. I had read book 1 the year prior, did enjoy it, but these were just super forgettable. There are some interesting scenes, and I do like Glokta as a morally gray, very gray character, but the rest is just meh. In this one, the sex scenes, some people were saying that they were meant to be just cringy, but anyway, I had to read them. So, ew. If you're gonna write something spicy, make it good, please, because I'm traumatized. And yeah, just overall, kind of a letdown. The ending was fine, just really not the best fantasy series I've read, and I feel like I've seen it on so many lists of like best fantasy, adult fantasy of all time. No, not really. So, meh. Let's talk about Bunny. This book started interesting. I had seen it on list of unhinged women book recommendations. I'm all for it. I want some female rage. I want some unhinged, just frankly interesting, complex female characters. That's all I want. I feel like Gillian Flynn doesn't write enough books to satisfy, you know, that craving. So you look elsewhere, and yeah, it starts interesting. You have this woman who is in graduate school with a group of other girls which are called Bunny, or call each other bunnies. And it gave me flashback of high school when girls would call each other kitten, well, in French, chaton, which always made me cringe. So I was really at first rooting for the main female character. You don't know if she's the one being snobbish or if the other girls are actually weird. And it just becomes weirder and weirder, which could have been good, but then it goes in the bad side of the weird towards the end. I hated the ending. I feel like, again, potential, just no, not worth it. I feel like if you're gonna add some potential like magic to a book, it can easily go in one direction or the other. So you might like this. Personally, no. There's a book on the list that I literally forgot what it was about. That tells you. Last to Vanish by Miranda. Super forgettable. I listened to the audiobook. It was about 6 hours, I think. This is one of the most meh book that I've read by her. I feel like usually she's like a 3.5, 4-star mystery thriller author for me, or like murder mystery in small towns. And this one, again, literally forgot what it was about. So another one that is a huge disappointment for me is Before the Coffee Gets Cold. And I say that having read the first 2 books in this series, and I will be also listening to the 3rd book. So like, it's a disappointment, but like, I am all for kind of time travel, time loops kind of books, and this one is a little bit like that. Like, it's a sci-fi, but like beginner-friendly sci-fi. So this is a translated work from Japanese. It was originally written as a play, so everything is set on like in one set in the coffee shop. Basically, there's rumors that if you go to this coffee shop, there's a way for you to travel back in time. There's some very strict rules. You have to stay seated at that coffee shop, even if you travel in time. You can only see people then that have been there, and you have to come back before the coffee gets cold. So the first couple stories were pretty good, and then I hated the last one, and then I decided to continue. Book 2 was kind of meh. I'm giving book 3 a shot just because I'm a sucker for good premises and I like the premise, so I will try it and I'll keep you updated. But I do want to mention the spoiler of the last short story, because I feel like a lot of these reviews I'm like, you know, the ending, you're gonna like it or not, but it's not specific enough that it's worth spoiling it. But this one, there is a need. So if you don't want to see, don't want to hear, definitely skip ahead. It's going to be very clear on the screen. So the last short story ruined it for me because I hate the premise of a main female character learning that she's pregnant and knowing that she will die if she continues the pregnancy and still doing it. To me, it's incredibly selfish. You just are giving birth to a child who will feel responsible for your death and that will not have a mother. And I really, really hate it, especially the author is a man, which like makes it even worse. I really, really, really hate that premise. So obviously this is a little bit what book 2 is about. So it's like the continuation of that. So that's why book 2 was also kind of a meh situation for me. But yes, until then it had potential, but I'm personally a big hater of that trope. So yeah, like I said, for some reason, I still want to continue. I'm going to give book 3 a shot. There are 4 books total, but book 3 was just translated. So I'll keep you updated, but all the things you could have done with that premise, you know, why that? Why that? A book that made me feel like the Grinch. Sweet Bean Paste. I had heard that this was a feel-good kind of story, and I've been trying to find some wholesome books. It's not usually my thing, but some of them, once in a while, make it to my most surprising or my best books of the year, as you will see. And I thought this might be, you know, it for me. I've been also trying to read more translated work, and for some reason I read a lot of Japanese translation this year. But this just didn't work for me. I do feel like Japanese translation read really dry, at least in English. This was no different, but this one just was kind of boring. I feel like the feel-good stories sometimes work for me, but sometimes they just make me feel like I'm reading a children's book for adult, and this one was a little bit like this. The big positive for it is the representation, which I don't know if it's a spoiler or not. I can tell you in the comment section, but essentially following the story of this man. He's working for a debt. Basically, you don't exactly know what happened, but he's working at this shop selling desserts, including desserts that are filled with sweet bean paste. And there's this older woman, and they kind of strike a deal / friendship. And I really like that premise. That kind of sounds like a K-drama or a J-drama. Okay, I hate that in French it's the opposite. So if you see me pause, it's because J is J and G is G. So annoying, but J-drama. But yes, I was kind of bored. It's not even long and I really struggled to finish it. So for me it was forgettable. For you it might not be the case, but meh, I regret buying it. Last but not least, Persuasion by Jane Austen. I know. I thought this was going to be a favorite. I loved Emma and Pride and Prejudice by her, so I was looking forward to trying this one. I thought the movie was better, which I just feel like it's not very clear in some sections, but also the only good part is the love declaration, which Jane Austen will always know how to write a really good love declaration, but I feel like I kept hearing how amazing the romance was in same level as, again, Pride and Prejudice and Emma, and it's not. I feel like it comes out of nowhere. Sure, it's pretty to hear, but I was not emotionally invested. I struggled to finish it once again, and it's not super long. My edition is like abnormally long because it's kind of like chubby. It's like really short, and it's 300 pages. So this is an unpopular opinion, but for me, this was forgettable. As you can see, it wasn't that bad. I feel like this year I had a very, very good reading year. I've been learning to put down books, DNF them, as we call it on Booktube, whenever I'm not enjoying it. And it has helped a ton. I feel like there are probably a lot more books that could have made it to this one or my worst, which is coming up. But these were just forgettable or just didn't live up to my expectations. It happens. Feel free to leave your own review of these in the comment section. Would love to hear your thoughts. Thumbs up, subscribe, and I will be putting other videos from this series on the screen that I recommend you check out, and I will see you in a coming video very soon. Bye.